Hey everybody, it's Joe with J Blake Photo, and in today's video, we're going to take a little bit of a detour on some of the things that we've been doing recently, and I'm going to review some software. I want to take a look at a plugin for Photoshop and Lightroom called Portrait Pro. Portrait Pro 18. It's actually Portrait Pro Studio 18 for retouching portraits. I've done some videos in the past about some retouching techniques, but I thought it would be nice to take a look at one of the plugins that are out there to help you work on things like improving the quality of skin tones, removing blemishes, maybe even making just a few modifications to the look of your image, and to make it really fast so that you can move through products really quick, especially if you're doing something on a deadline. Now, I know that for a lot of folks who are using Photoshop, especially if you're spending just hours and hours on one image just to make it perfect, there are just times when you can't afford that kind of time, or the client just hasn't given you that kind of time. If you're on a budget, either time or otherwise, and you need to get photos to a client quickly, sometimes plugins can be a good direction to go. Now, they're not always a good direction to go, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we discuss this particular plugin, but I thought it'd be fun to take a look at some shots that I did a couple of weeks ago for a wedding of the bride and groom and see how this plugin helps me move things along with these images. So we're going to hop into Lightroom and take a look. All right, so here we are in Adobe Lightroom Classic, and I've got one of the photos from a recent photo shoot that I did. This was with a bride and groom. This was actually a photo shoot that I donated as a part of a fundraiser, so they contributed to the fundraiser. And then we had a really good time up at a lodge up on the mountain not far from here. You can actually kind of see in this photo over on the right-hand side, this kind of line over here. This is actually a storage container that is sitting in the parking lot behind them. And so to obscure that, to get this particular shot, I had to actually put my entire body inside of a bush and shoot through it, which is why you've got some kind of out of focus elements, which I thought were a nice touch anyway, so that actually worked out. But this is one of the photos that I liked in this shoot. Now, these photos have actually already been delivered to the client. They were very happy with the quality, but I always like to do a second pass on client photos just to see if there's anything else that I can get to them, anything else that they may want, maybe different angles, different looks, different facial expressions. And so that's part of the reason why I'm taking a double look at this particular shot, because I just kind of liked it. There's another version of it that I did deliver to them, but looking at it a second time, I kind of like this one. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to take a look at Portrait Pro Studio to kind of show you what the process looks like with this app and with this plugin when you are kind of under the gun, when you're on a time crunch and you really need to get things to the client quickly, and it's either a budget issue or a time issue or whatever the situation is, but you've got to get it to the client and you don't have a lot of time to really kind of get in there and be as super nitpicky with layers in Photoshop and the Wacom tablet and all that kind of stuff, because you can get great results either way, and sometimes you just don't have the time. So this photo has already been adjusted. So I've already done all the fine-tuned adjustments. So I've got my highlights, shadows, whites and blacks where I want them to be, in my vibrance and saturation. I've made some slight modifications here to the tone curve, and I've adjusted my HSL levels, added just a little bit of sharpening, noise reduction, and I've removed chromatic aberrations and done some profile corrections. This particular shot was shot at, looks like 95 millimeters at ISO 100 at f2.8, 1/100th of a second, and this was shot with my Canon 70-200 millimeter f2.8 Mark II on the Canon 6D Mark II. Now that I've got this shot kind of where I want it, and there were a couple of different versions of this shot, but this is the one that I wanted to edit today. So now that I've got this shot where I want to show you the workflow of getting into Portrait Pro Studio. Some of these applications and plugins do things just a little bit differently, and that may lend itself to one or another being your preference. I'm perfectly fine with the workflow that this particular app uses, but I wanted to show it to you. So when you're opening up one of these files, okay, and you right click on it down here, you can actually go into edit in, and this is how you open up an application or a external editor. So in this case, the primary external editor is normally Photoshop if you have it installed with Lightroom, but you can see down underneath that I've got edit in Portrait Pro Studio. The way you set that is by going up into the preferences, and under external editing, you can see here that the first editor is always going to be Photoshop if you have it installed, but you can set a custom additional external editor, and then you can select the file formats that you want to set that in. So I've got this going TIFF, sRGB, 16-bit channel, 240 bits, or 240 pixels per inch, with no compression. And I've got it set to stack with the original. So close that, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to hit edit in and edit in Portrait Pro Studio. Now, whenever you do an edit with an external editor, Lightroom gives you the opportunity to modify those settings just in case they're not what you want every single time. I'm fine with them as they are, but if there was something that you wanted to change, you could do that right here. In this case, I'm going to edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. The copy is going to be a TIFF at 16 bits per channel. So I'm going to hit edit. And now what it's going to do is it's going to export that file. You can see up there it says preparing file for edit. I'm going to export that file, and that file is then going to open in Portrait Pro Studio 18. The first thing that Portrait Pro Studio is going to do is it is going to scan the image for faces. Now, if for whatever reason it doesn't detect one of the faces in your image, or maybe there is a face that's in profile, what you can do is you can actually click manually locate face, and you can click on the nose, and it will let you select that as the face, and it'll kind of figure it out from there. So in this case, it's asking you, okay, what kind of face is this? So we're going to put female on this one, male on this one, okay, and we're going to dive right into the groom's face, and it's going to process that face. Now you can also go in and manually modify the structures that it's identified in the face, although I find that it actually does a pretty decent job. So here's the big warning about using plugins and apps like this. They normally can go way over the top with the kind of edits and adjustments that they're doing. Normally, if you're editing things with a Wacom tablet, you're making small adjustments at a time, you're kind of looking at things and then going in and making changes and then coming back and looking again. With these apps, they are not doing anything subtly. Normally, everything is just kind of, big hits, big changes. And so you have to be very careful, because the changes that they can make can be rather extreme, and the client might not like that. But I'll also say that the client might want that. So you have to listen to your client. You have to listen to what it is that they're saying they want, and really kind of give them all their options. I've had clients that don't want this kind of editing done, and I've had clients that want lots of it. And when I think it looks like a Barbie doll when we're done with it, they absolutely love it, and it's what they want. Remember, we're doing what they tell us to do, and so we're at the behest of our client. So in this case, we don't want to go too overboard. We're just looking to clean things up. So the first thing I want to point out is that there are 3 tabs here: Controls, Presets, and Snapshots. Snapshots work just like they do in Photoshop. You can create snapshots and kind of go back and forth through them. Presets are, as you'd expect, presets that let you use some of their predefined adjustments. Now, it has automatically jumped into the standard preset, which I personally think is a little over the top, especially when it comes to the lighting and the coloring on the skin. If we use the flip to before button up here, you'll actually see that it has trimmed his chin quite a bit. It has lightened his skin tone also, and it's done some adjustments to his eye. For some reason there on the left-hand side, his left eye has been squeezed up, and I don't know why. I don't like that, so I'm going to click on Reset to Original. In most cases, I think using this app, you would want to start from complete scratch. You'd want to start over. So there are lots of options under this Face Sculpt tool, including this Master Fade, which kind of, I think it just does what it thinks you want it to do. I'm not really sure where it gets its kind of end result, but as you can see, It gives him a giant head, tweaks his eyeballs out of sorts, squeezes his face in. It's just super strange, and I'm not really sure why. And we wouldn't want to do that. But there are some things in here that maybe you would want to do. You know, maybe you want to just tweak the jaw just a little bit and bring it in just a tad. You know, maybe you want to take a look at the eyes and, you know, modify the eyebrow shape a little bit. There's all sorts of things that you can do in here to make, you know, tweaks and adjustments. Some of these top level controls, though, I'm not really sure about. I'm not really sure about mouth shape. It just gives them a weird kind of chipmunk face. I'm not really sure what that's about. So we're not going to do that. You can plump up his lips, though, if you need to. If someone had super thin lips and they were maybe a little bit self-conscious about it, you could adjust his nose. Some of these controls will really modify the shape of the person's face, so you might not necessarily want to go after them. We can very much increase his hair volume. Okay, so there's a lot in Face Sculpt. You can get really fine-tuned with it and make those adjustments. In this particular edit, I'm not going to use any of that. So I'm going to turn that off. Okay, so we're going to move back to skin smoothing. Okay, that's our next tab here. I'm going to hide their tooltip. For most of these apps, when you have a skin smoothing app, it's going to give you the option to really select and mask out exactly what skin is before it applies its modification, because otherwise it could be removing detail from another part of the image, or it could be removing parts from another person's face or skin that might have a completely different type of complexion or skin tone, and that could really mess things up and make things look really uneven. So we're going to avoid that, and we're going to hit OK, because honestly that mask looks pretty good to me. So going down here, we've got this master fade control, and if we bring it all the way up, it really just makes him look like he's painted with watercolor. So again, you want to be careful when using tools like this. So I'm going to bring that down, and I am going to lighten the bags under his eyes just a little bit, not too much, and I want to smooth them out as well. Okay, just to bring those down. And a little bit less maybe. Okay, and we're going to smooth out the crow's feet. Okay, and now again, I can turn this off and then turn it back on just to get an idea of how it looks. Okay, next we've got this imperfections slider, so we can kind of bring that up, and that's just really at a baseline level, it's just smoothing out the skin. This is normally what you would be applying if you were doing any other type of skin smoothing app, or if you were going in and doing like if you're doing like a split frequency modification on here. We'll just bring the wrinkles out just a little bit. We'll adjust some of these fine shadows, just so that some of the creases in his face are a little bit less noticeable. Remove pores. That just really just totally smooths out his face. That's a bit much. I'm going to keep that off. Remove shine can be helpful if you have somebody maybe with a super shiny spot on their head. I need that sometimes. And we're going to add some sharpening. So I find it really helpful once you remove some of the imperfections in the skin. Sometimes you lose a little bit of the detail. It's nice to put it back with some sharpening. This particular sharpener can go real nuts, and you can make things look really bad. So we'll keep that kind of low, but we do want to bring that back in. I'm not really sure what a round mouth means. Just guessing it's just skin imperfections. And then non-face skin. So non-face skin is like the neck, the shoulders, areas around the face that aren't actually part of the construction of the face that the app has identified. And then we can increase or decrease texture. And you can actually set a texture type, and there's looks like about 10 different types in there. There's also a spot removal tool. This is not a spot removal tool like you've seen in Photoshop or in Lightroom. This is actually it will go through and automatically find and remove spots. I don't like it very much because I find that it just does some really funky things to skin. So we're going to avoid that. And that's it for skin smoothing. So we're going to turn that off and then turn it back on. Some of those subtle differences might actually not show up in the YouTube video, so I apologize in advance there, but it's definitely making some changes. Okay. Skin lighting and coloring. This is actually a feature I really like in here because You know, in this photo shoot, I did not bring a reflector. I didn't really need one. There was actually a building just behind them that was creating quite a bit of reflected light because the sun was actually on the other side. So I didn't really need a reflector, and I didn't use an off-camera flash. But you can still see there's a lot of really good light on their faces. But let's say that you're in an environment where you don't have some of that kit, or you just don't own those things, or you didn't bring them with you, and you didn't expect the conditions to be the way they were, and you look at the photos and you go, oh man, I really botched that, and you wish that you had had a chance to modify the lighting. This app actually kind of lets you do that. You know, you can kind of do a full, like, we could actually do kind of a reflector here. We could do kind of a kicker. So this actually looks like I had a reflector underneath his chin, which I didn't, but it's kind of cool that you could do that. So we're gonna turn that off. I don't really need it, but it's cool that it's there. You've also got a modeling light option, which really kind of focuses the light kind of in the middle of the face. You can flatten out the lighting on the face altogether. And you can also add additional highlights to the cheekbones if you want to, just to really kind of key those up a bit. And then you can add shadows to the left as well as the right. And it's really smart about adding these things. You can add kind of a kicker light. You can add some underneath kind of smokiness to the eye, some shadowing. There's a pout mode. And you can add a little bit of definition to the nose here. So in reality, you know, this actually is pretty cool. And then you can edit, of course, again, the skin mask. You can also modify the skin color. So, you know, if the person is not tan enough and you want to add some tan, or maybe if you want to remove some tan, I'm gonna keep that right where it is. I like it as it is. But you can do all sorts of things with skin color in here, which is kind of fun. I'm going to skip makeup. We'll actually do that when we hop over to the bride. And same with eye control. For the mouth and nose, you can just do all kinds of crazy things. You know, I will say with eyes and with mouths, I do notice in a lot of people's photos, especially when they first get into retouching, one of the things that they'll do is they'll brighten up the whites of the eyes and they'll brighten up the teeth. And while in some cases a very subtle kind of tweak to those things can be helpful, in a lot of cases it just makes it look really weird, like they have glowing eyes like out of, you know, Stargate or something. It just looks super strange. So you really don't want to be doing a lot of that. So in this particular version of this image, I'm pretty happy with his teeth. You could whiten them up there. This actually does a pretty realistic job. You can also clean them, which basically just removes detail. And you can increase the area that's whitened, so it includes more of the gums. And then you can also kind of generally sharpen the mouth and the teeth, and, you know, make them look like planks of wood. So you can do some really interesting things. Again, you have to be careful when you're using these tools. So in this case, I kind of like what I've got there. I'm not going to do anything with his hair, but there is a lot that we could do if we wanted to, say, make him a blonde, I think. So there we go. We could, you know, give him some crazy hair. So we'll eliminate that, turn that off. And you can also do overall image and layer adjustments, which I'm not going to do because in this particular case, I did everything I wanted to before I got into the app. I actually did everything I wanted in Lightroom. I probably wouldn't make changes like that in this. I would do it in Lightroom. Okay, so now let's say we're done with his face and we want to move over to hers. So the way that we do that is over on the top left here, there's a button called Other Faces. We click that and it pops us back out to that original screen. We can also still add additional faces and we can adjust the outlines of the faces that we've already worked on. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and select this as female and hit continue. Okay, so same rules apply as before. The app has automatically put its standard adjustment on her. So let's go ahead and switch from before and after, and you can definitely see the work that it's doing. I feel like it's not as pronounced on her as it was on him. And so we will still turn it off, but I think this is an instance where this is not absolutely terrible, although I think the amount of reduction in her chin and some of the lightening in her skin is just a little much. So we're going to go again over to presets, and we're going to go reset to original. Another option that you actually have is to go over to standard, which again, that is the default for it to apply. And you can go back over to controls, and you can actually turn off the things that you don't like. So for example, if you really liked the skin smoothing and the lighting and the makeup, but you didn't like the sculpting, you could just turn the sculpting off. And there, it's adjusted the sculpting, turned it completely off, and you can see the difference there, but the other changes haven't been affected. The other thing that you can do is, if you do like one or the other, is you can actually go in and you can say, okay, I like it, but it's a little too extreme. So for example, I think if we go down into mouth shape, maybe it's in face shape, yeah, jaw. If we bring that down so that it doesn't do as much of an aggressive adjustment, and then we kind of turn that off and on just to kind of see. It's doing, again, some minor tweaks. It looks like what it's doing is it's bringing down the bridge of her nose, which can also be attributed to the lens. It's not in this case, but it can be if you're using a wide angle lens. It's also bringing up her eye just a little bit on the side, kind of widening things up. So honestly, that's not a terrible look. You could just kind of run with that. So if we kept those face sculpt changes, and we went down into skin smoothing, and we kind of looked at the differences there. Really, the thing that I'm looking at is, does it match the work that we did on him? And in this case, I think it's a little more aggressive than what we did for him. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this master fade, and I'm just going to bring it down a little bit, and then I'm going to do the same thing and kind of review. And that feels a little bit closer on her to what we did on him. So again, the advantage is that we can use some of the built-in presets and then tone them down or tweak them, again, to save time. If we go into our lighting controls, and you can actually see here, again, we can move lighting around, we can change the direction and shape. We're going to keep it right where it is. It's added a little bit of smoky eye, which I don't necessarily disagree with, and it has definitely lightened up her face. The problem is that it's done it considerably more than we have on him. So what I want to do is I actually want to go down to skin color. It's set it to baby skin. I'm not really sure where I got that from. And I want to bring that down because it's a bit much. So you can see if we push it too far, you can see how bright that gets. I'm going to bring that down quite a bit. And I'm going to bring the brightness contrast down just a little bit as well. And then if we turn that off and turn it back on, so you can see it's still doing a little bit of sculpting with light, but it's not totally overdoing it on her face and making it look like she's in a completely different photo than he is. The next thing I want to look at is makeup. So I'm going to turn it off and on and just kind of see how much is being done here. And surprisingly, it actually, other than the lower eyeshadow, there's really nothing that it's doing. I actually kind of like this mascara slider because it really can kind of increase the thickness of the mascara. You can also increase or change the lower and upper lashes depending on where they are, and make them a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. You can also add additional eyeliner if there isn't already, and you can add some blush, bronzer, highlighter, eyebrow pencil, all sorts of fun things. Okay, so I'm going to keep that where it is. We turn that off. We can see that that's really just a little bit of increase in the mascara. All right, let's see what it's doing on our eyes. So it just looks like it brightened them up, cleaned them up just a little bit, made them a little sharper. Then of course it brightened her teeth up, and it did make some adjustments to the picture. It looks like it added some contrast. And actually I'm gonna zoom out here. I'm going to turn those on, turn those off. So it's added contrast and it's added some vignetting. I'm not saying that those are bad things, but I would have added them in Photoshop or Lightroom. I don't want to add them in here where there's no control after the fact. So I'm going to turn all that off, and I'm pretty happy with where that is, in terms of the overall look for her. I am kind of curious, it didn't do anything with her hair. And so even if you didn't want to recolor the hair, you could actually, and there's a pretty big recolor. It actually warms it up quite a bit, which actually isn't terrible. So you could actually do something a little bit like that. You can add some additional shine as well as adding vibrance. Okay, so I like that, but the one thing that I noticed is that we did put some adjustment on her eyes just to make them a little bit sharper, to make them pop a little bit. We didn't for him. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna hit here, and I'm gonna go continue. So we're gonna go back to his face, and we're gonna go back to the eye. Okay, and you can see, you can go real crazy and give him werewolf eyes. But really what I want to do is I just want to whiten them just a little bit. I want to clean them up just a little bit, and I want to sharpen them. Just so they pop just a little bit. And we're going to brighten the iris just a smidge. Now, you don't want to brighten the iris to make it look like they have some sort of, supernatural power, or that they're about to shoot lasers out of their eyes. But the idea is that there's a light hitting them that isn't there. And it would normally, if you were in a studio and you were using off-camera flash or strobes or something like that, it would brighten up the pupils a bit, or brighten up the irises a bit. So we want to do that here. And that way it just matches hers just a little bit. Now, he's squinting a little bit more than she is, and his eyes aren't as bright as hers, but that's okay. I think that little bit actually does the trick to make them match just a little bit more. Okay, so now if we kind of do this here, and we take a closer look at the before and after, we can see just minor differences, cleaning up skin, minor modifications to the shape of the face, nothing crazy. This is still them, they still look like them. Okay, so now when we're done, we're gonna go ahead and up here go to this little button that says return from plugin, and it's gonna save the image in the original TIFF format that it came in, and it's gonna dump us back into Lightroom or to the desktop. And here we are back in Lightroom, and we've got our image, and we can actually see the two side by side. We can actually kind of zoom in here a little bit, and we can see the difference between these two shots. So there's our edited shot, and there's our original shot. Like I said, nothing crazy. And for each client, this is going to be different. So this particular plugin, and this is Portrait Pro Studio 18. There are lots of apps and plugins like this. Portraiture is another popular one that I have used, and maybe I'll do a review on that one as well. Go ahead and let me know in the comments, and I'll go ahead and do that. But the idea here is it saves you time, it allows you to still provide a quality product for your client, and especially if this is the kind of thing that your client wants, it gives them what they want. It lets you make your client happy on a budget and gets it in on time. And in many instances, this is what your client is looking for. So we've completed this image. We could do this a couple of different times. I have the studio version of this particular app. And the reason that I have the studio version is because it allows you to utilize RAW files. And in Photoshop, it lets you use the plugin as a smart plugin, as a smart filter rather, on layers. The standard version of the app does not, and there's another level, I think it's an enterprise or commercial level license of this application. The only other feature that it adds is the ability to do things in batch processing. The company that makes this application also makes one that lets you do body modifications, so for full body shots. I have that as well. I might do a review on that one. Again, let me know in the comments if that would be something that you'd be interested in. And then they also make a landscape app, which I demoed, did not like, chose not to get it. But again, I also have Portraiture. Portraiture doesn't do any of the modifications that this app does. It's purely skin tones, and it's a little simpler. But if you'd be interested in seeing the differences, I'd be happy to show that to you. Or, the difference between that and, splitting frequencies, or, just using the healing brush and, blur tools and that sort of thing. There's a lot of different ways that you can do skin smoothing and use Warp Tool for some of this kind of stuff. But again, this makes it fast and it makes it easy so that you can deliver a quality product to your client that they want. You can do it without breaking the bank for you or for them, both in time and money. So there's a place and there's a time for these apps. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. Depends on your situation, depends on your client. But it's a nice tool to have in the event that your client needs something and they need it quick. So I like having it in my toolbox. So thanks for watching. I hope you liked this video. If you did, go ahead and hit the like button. If you're interested in videos like this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I do videos all the time. How-to videos, editing videos, photos, cinematography, drones, technology news, camera news, all that sort of stuff. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button and hit the bell next to it so that YouTube will hopefully let you know when I have new videos that I'm putting out. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.